Hello, this is Clarence Moye with Awards Daily here with Maggie Cohn, the writer, co-showrunner, and executive producer on HBO Max's The Staircase. Maggie, welcome to, excuse me. Oh God, I'm gonna have to edit that out. Maggie, very nice to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you too.
Excellent. You were my last interview for Emmy Phase 1, and so I'm running on fumes here. Um, Tremendous limited series, tremendous true crime limited series, of course. And I want to talk about sort of the impact of true crime. But before we go down that path, I want to talk to you about your interest in this case. What brought you to it? What about the Michael Peterson case compelled you to work on this project?
Um, well, I think actually the way that you phrased the question is kind of what brought me to the project, which is that you've categorized it or kind of defined it as the Michael Peterson case. And I would maybe push back on that
Sure.
and say that it's a case about multiple people and, maybe most specifically about Kathleen Peterson. But, so I did view the series as an opportunity to explore her specifically in a fictionalized manner, but kind of the concept of or dig in deeper to how we portray quote unquote victims in true crime, generally speaking. But going back to what the question was intended, I was I'm a fan of documentary filmmaking, and I saw the Staircase documentary on the Sundance Channel when it was initially aired. And I remember I was speaking to a friend recently about the show, and she's like, I remember that. She's like, I got the Sundance Channel to watch that documentary, and it was must-see TV, which, for a documentary film that of that time period in the early 2000s, it's saying a lot. And so it had always been an interest to me because of the storytelling within the documentary, because of the family. And then, of course, the nature of the event that occurred, because while it's categorized as true crime, we don't know if a crime ever took place. So it actually is, questioning the actual genre itself from within it. And so when, the Staircase opportunity came up, I thought it was just such an interesting opportunity to take that concept and then explore it, the idea of storytelling, documentary filmmaking, and the search for truth, when truth is such a nebulous concept. And to do it within the context of true crime was just a really great opportunity, because I think people are drawn towards black and white, innocent and guilty. And I think that perhaps when you are myopic about things and your focus is so narrow, you miss the larger context and the ability to learn from something.
Sure. And I want to say I'm very glad that you called me out on the Kathleen Peterson issue.
No, I didn't mean to call you out.
No, not at all. Because you're absolutely right. This is one of the things I think the show does the very best. And it was actually one of my next questions, and I'll ask it now, which is, it makes Kathleen Peterson a flesh and blood person. She is not just the body at the bottom of the stairs. She is not just the person in the crime scene photos in this series. She has hopes, she has dreams, she has fears. Talk to me about that process of humanizing her.
I think, it was a character process. I think it was like any fictional character, but then obviously it was the non-fictional element to it we didn't ignore, and we wanted to respect that as well. But so it's interesting because the way I see it is almost like visual and a bit abstract. And that's, the idea that a character, when it's a non-fictional character, you get information from various sources, and that kind of shapes the boundary of a person or of a character. And then as creators and writers, we then fill that boundary in with a bit of a fictional element, but we're keeping within the boundary of it. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but so we stayed within the boundaries of what we knew about Kathleen Peterson, and didn't necessarily add or to it, but of course we fictionalized it, but within the context of this frame that we learned about her, through reading, through the variety of interviews that had happened over the years, And I think also just through common sense,
Mhm.
and for me, looking at this woman in the early 2000s who is a mother, a stepmother, um, the quote unquote breadwinner,
Mhm.
um, a devoted wife, a devoted sister, a daughter. It was, and she was trying to do it all, which I can relate to, and I think she was learning that maybe that life wasn't like you don't necessarily life isn't played by the rules, and she was learning it in maybe the context of Durham, which while it was this a liberal town,
Mhm.
it was a small town. um and I think she was a bit of like a visionary really, and like her life could have been a lot bigger and different, but society and kind of the things that were on her shoulders kept her from that.
Right.
And I think for us, it was just really important to show the absence of a person. In order to understand the absence of a person, you need to know who that person was.
Right.
And what, in order for that absence to have an impact on the viewer, you have to understand how the removal of that person from our characters' lives has this enormous impact on them. And so it was just incumbent on us to create that character, and like I said, kind of like create that character within this framework or this boundary that had been created, or that we had kind of shaped based on what we learned about her from real people.
So tell me about the collaborative process in working with Antonio Campos on this show as co-showrunners.
Mhm. Um, well, it was great. I'd always loved Antonio's work. Prior to the staircase, we had tried to work on projects together before.
Mhm.
And I think with this show, we got into it and he wrote this incredible pilot. And then, the question is, there's 8 more or 7 more episodes. What's next? And then
Mhm.
so it was on us to shape the season and to know where we're going to ask what question, in what timeline we're going to ask that, in what episode will the question will be raised. And I'm talking about all of the questions that the episode that the season presents, not just about what happened that night. And in what timeline, and just kind of coming up with like the matrix for it. And I had like all the note cards in my office, and it was like a 360-degree view. So like I'm holding up my computer and trying to show over Zoom, and trying to show Antonio, and it's like color coordinated, which I think while people made fun of me for that, I think they were really grateful at the same time, just quietly about that. And so and then of course, so that's like the writing process. And then you get into prep and production, and he's directing, and it's basically I pick up the slack where he can't get it, he's direct,
Mhm.
and so it was just a collaboration. But I think what was really important, because I think that's what all co-showrunners have, that sort of collaboration. But I think what's unique to us is that since we were taking risks with this show, it was really nice to have someone to take that risk with, and to kind of to be like, do you think this is going to work? And be like, I don't know, but like, let's do it. And like
Mhm.
have that support system. That was really, I think, unique to this show and to our relationship.
Right. So I myself did not see the documentary because having lived in this area and seen
Right.
it on the news every day, day in, day out, having been the son of a father who was kind of obsessed with the case, I was kind of done with it. Like I'd heard too many
You
kitchen
will be
table
season two.
conversations. Yeah. Um, so I did not watch the documentary, but I know that in watching this whole series, the documentary characters are a very key part of this case, because
Mhm.
not only because to the least of which is Sophie's involvement with Michael toward the in episodes 5, 6, and 7. um but in episode 2, that is the first episode that you had written for the series. That's when we meet the documentary filmmakers. Talk to me
Right.
about the involvement of them within this series, not specifically the involvement of the documentarians, but what they bring to the series, what they bring as characters to the overall narrative that you were trying to construct.
Right. So I mean, everyone asks that question, like, why, not that you're asking it, but like, why see the staircase when there's a documentary? And
Right,
it's like,
right,
well, this is very much not an adaptation.
right.
And it's definitely inspired by events. So we can explore and themes that you can't necessarily explore in this way in nonfiction filmmaking. So for us, because it is a series about the understanding multiple perspectives,
Mhm.
about storytelling, seeing how a documentary is constructed was a way to visually and narratively show what it is to create a story. We also did it with the prosecution. We did it with the defense team. We did it with each of our characters. Everyone's telling a story. The documentary team happens to just be doing it in a way that is comparable to the way that we're doing it. Antonio, myself, the other writers, the editors, the other director, we're also taking setups and shots and putting our imprint onto a story. And so to visually show that to the viewer is a way, it was the perfect device to encourage critical thinking, to say, look at this, look at how stories are made, look at how you're being not fed, but like how you're ingesting these stories, whether it's, Dateline, whether it's one of the other incredible true crime series that came out this year. Look at these. And now you might have a little bit of a better understanding of why things are being included, what happens when you put two shots side by side, the emotionality that creates. And so for us, that's what the documentary team was. They were kind of initially, going in and being the viewer to a certain extent, but the viewer then gets to look at the viewer. And so it's a bit meta, but I also think we really, one of the initial questions we asked was, how much do we think the viewer knows? Have they seen the documentary? Like, do we want to assume like blah, 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 like what, and like basically the consensus was viewers are intelligent, they're smart, but maybe there's a way to make it, to give them like a little bit more inside baseball and give them a little glimpse into what we do as creators and filmmakers. And then they can take that and use it, with everything, with any viewing experience moving forward.
And I like that you use the term meta, because it fits into the overall, one of the overall themes of the show, which is who controls your narrative, right? And that
Exactly.
it becomes a far more compelling way to revisit the legacy of this story than just a straightforward blah blah blah, here's what happened, then he did this and did this and this, because
Right.
you're looking at all kinds of different perspectives, all kinds of different people who have opinions and vantage points on who Michael Peterson was, who Kathleen Peterson was.
Right.
So when you look at all of this, and you've got that sort of undercurrent theme of who controls your narrative, did the show ever set out to try to influence or to give additional information about Michael Peterson's guilt or innocence? How did you want to handle that as you navigated this whole narrative arc?
I think the short answer is no.
Mhm.
The longer,
But
yeah, the longer, but I think that's the easy answer, and I don't think that that's necessarily what I would, I think there was debate in the writers' room, which I think is kind of like the initial kind of that creates the zeitgeist of anything, is the bias. And I use bias not necessarily in the most pejorative sense, but your backstory, you're bringing something to everything you look at. You're bringing it, I'm bringing it, anyone's bringing backstory to how they view the world. And so I think for us, that was the way that we wanted to explore the idea of innocence and guilt. Isn't necessarily like, do you think he's innocent or guilty, but why do you think he's innocent or guilty? And in addition to that, what are you bringing to that supposition that then creates that? Like, what is your backstory? And I think, we were attempting to do that. And I think the documentary team is part of that, is like, if you, the photographs of the staircase, the blood spatter on the staircase, though they are what they are. And of course, you can argue different angles, different lighting could give you a different tone, or to how you view the photos, or how the photos are received. But those are all the same photos, and anyone who looks at them, when you start piling on other pieces of information, it starts changing perspective. But again, it's just the same photos. So for us, it was always important for people to wonder, what am I bringing to the photos? Not what is the photo telling me, but what am I telling the
Sure.
photo it needs to be? Yeah.
Right.
So I guess that's how we wanted to
Yeah. And
explore.
it works really well too, because as you and I talked before we started recording, my wife and I had different opinion. My wife had a very staid opinion. I had a, yeah, I don't know opinion, kind of,
Mhm.
wasn't in the trial, didn't watch it a day in, day out, listened to it from other people, from my father, for example. And just, reserving judgment because I'm not a member of the jury, right?
Right.
But my wife comes from, has had been in abusive relationships before. So
Mhm.
she sees signs that I did not see because she's been someone in that case. And so,
Yeah.
you know, it definitely changed the tone of our conversations about this case. It changed the way that we looked at it. And I think that comes from bringing in all those different perspectives, bringing in all those different stories, um,
Yeah.
including the children.
Mhm.
That's something that isn't necessarily focused on quite a bit, is all of I'll call them the Peterson children. They don't all have the last name Peterson, but the group of children that they had
Right.
assembled.
Right.
Um, Talk to me about including them within the story, and sort of what those perspectives bring to this case.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way to approach it, is that is the children, because they all have there's a common denominator, right? They all lived at 1810 Cedar for at least a portion of their lives. They all, loved Kathleen, they all loved Michael. Um, and so there's a commonality between them, and yet each of them has a different perspective to some degree on how to hold that night, right?
Mhm.
Because I think it's always specifically like, did he do it? Did he not do it? Which is important, I think, obviously. But it's also like beyond that, like, how do I deal with the loss of somebody that I love? How do I deal with my father, or the man that I know being in prison? So it's all these complicated things. And I think each of the kids, because they had this commonality between them, but also had such a variety of experiences prior to getting to 1810 Cedar, um, that you can kind of then explore, well, how did their past experiences shape the way that they experienced that night?
Right.
And so, you have Michael's biological sons, they have one, and they're diverse too. They each have their different way of handling it. Then you have, the Margaret and Martha, who, Michael was their guardian, then Kathleen became their guardian in addition to Michael. They had a tumultuous family history, and that shaped how they viewed it. And then you have Caitlin, Kathleen's biological daughter, and her experiences with her mom prior to that, and the relationship she had with her mother shaped her opinion of what happened that night as well. So I think if they can have such a variety of opinions on what happened that night, then you just extrapolate into the common population, and like, I'm sorry to hear about your wife, but exactly, it's like it's something that you see signs, and whether or
Mhm.
not those signs do add up to what you think they're going to add up to, it impacts you, and that's the way that you view the world. And so when you look at something like the justice system as the objective arbiter of something, and then a jury, you get to realize that it's not black and white. Like, people, the backstory matters. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the kids are a good way of exploring the diversity of opinion, even though there's a huge commonality between them.
Right. Well, as a casual viewer of the series, you go back and look at it and you think, well, Martha found out that they wanted to give up the sisters for adoption, or wanted to give up one of the sisters for adoption, or to give it to a family member because she was difficult. They were having problems raising both of them together because she was
Right.
spirited and had some developmental issues, or whatever the case was. And you think, wow, that what is it like to find that out as an adult, that somebody wanted to give up your sister? That there's How does that
Yeah.
impact you, and how do you view the rest of this, all of the everything else that happens after that? How do you change that through that prism of that information?
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting example to bring up, because even in that, it's obviously an impact, hopefully an impactful storyline, but it's not the biggest storyline, obviously, in the show. But even in that, you have Aunt Blair, describing the way in which, Michael had approached her to, take Martha because of the troubles she was having. And I'm not going to diagnose something which I don't know. But then you have Patty, on the other hand, later telling her, yes, that did happen, but we did it because we felt we couldn't give you the
Right.
support you needed.
Right.
So again, it's one person saying one thing and it's one person saying another thing. And for us, what was important was not necessarily the truth behind it, but that Martha finally had an explanation for why she felt that conflict.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like, well, while I'm not happy about the fact that I have to kind of, investigate this, at least I have some idea of that I can identify why the tumult exists.
Hmm.
And I think for a lot of people, that's important. It's like, it's not necessarily a form of gaslighting, but it's the relief you feel when you're like, the truth hurts, but at least I'm not imagining something,
Right.
which is
Right.
kind of like a form of relief, I suppose. I mean, but again, that's my personal opinion, and that's why I shaped it the way I did. So, I mean, to each their own, obviously.
Um, you mentioned before the bevy of true crime projects that have come on the streaming and network airwaves over the past couple of months. Why do you think true crime is having such a moment right now? It's never gone away, but I don't remember any sort of concentration of this many high profile series, high profile cases like The Staircase coming out at the same time. Why do you think that is?
Oh gosh, I have so many answers to that. I think inherently, like, true crime is, I think because of the internet and the way that you can take a subject matter and do these deeper dives, which we did as well, and like into, source, and I wouldn't count it as a source, but it did contribute to like Reddit forums, or
Right.
someone having a blog, or a blog or a podcast devoted to this. You have all these mediums, which again goes to the theme of our show, which is you get the ability to have such a variety of perspective on something right now. It's not just front page news. It's front page news. It's a podcast. It's a TV show. It's everything. So I think the proliferation of it makes people a little bit greedy, and they get greedy because they want, like, and this is why it's like they want an answer, and they want to feel like the chaos in this world, of which there's a lot. And I think people are like, it's more chaotic than it's ever been. And I'd argue, the
Oh,
invention of the nuclear bomb was somewhat of a chaotic time. So,
yeah.
like, the annihilation of humanity, I feel like people were kind of on edge. But right now, we can really play into like, maybe I can just get a firm grasp on this. Maybe I can understand it.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of satisfaction behind thinking you understand something. And our show is very much about questioning that desire, and also trying to push you towards being comfortable with like a bit of more of an ambivalent approach, and
Mhm.
being like, that's okay. um and so I think that's probably why people are more interested, and why, and I think because Hollywood's going to follow interest and taste, so here we
Yeah.
are. But I guess ours is like, just for us, it's like, it's the truth. Like, our show is like, the truth is we don't know if a crime occurred, and we're exploring the idea that there isn't any truth anyway.
Right.
So
Yeah. And plus you're taking the opportunity, like a lot of shows have, to look at a popular case
yeah,
from a different perspective, from an inclusive perspective, from the
yeah,
perspective of Kathleen Peterson. You know,
right.
Pam and Tommy looks at things from Pam Anderson's perspective. That's just two examples I'm thinking of, but I know that there are many more that look at old things from new lenses, from a 2022 lens. And I think that that's an incredibly valuable thing to be doing right now.
Yeah, and I think with Pam and Tommy, not to, but like, I think what's exceptional about that is it makes you realize, oh, like, I had my opinion about her or what
Right.
happened, and
Right.
now I'm understanding, like,
Right. And the staircase does the exact same thing. I had an opinion and preconceived notions
Right.
about this person, about this person. Oh, you're giving me different vantage points. You're giving me new
Right.
information. So it's been incredibly valuable that way. Last question for you. I've asked this of Antonio. Do not tell me what your opinion is, but did the production process of the staircase change your opinion of the guilt or innocence of Michael Peterson?
It did not. It further convinced me that the multiple perspectives that we believed going in that existed
Mhm.
really do exist.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair. All right, very good. Maggie Cohn, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for the time. Best of luck to you in the season ahead, and good luck with the Emmys.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.